This video is an independent investigative analysis based on publicly available documents, declassified intelligence records, and historical precedent. It is intended for educational and discussion purposes only. No claims are made regarding definitive guilt or factual certainty. Viewer discretion is advised. JonBenet Ramsey, a name the world will never forget. A 6-year-old beauty queen found dead in her own home hours after her parents received a ransom note. But this wasn't just any note. It was too long, too detailed, too rehearsed. A ransom demand that didn't read like a demand for money, but a message meant for someone else. The amount? Too specific. The phrasing? Too calculated. The handwriting? A contradiction in itself. Some say it was staged. Others believe it was something far more sinister. But the real question is, if this wasn't a ransom note, then what was it? Because once you see what's hiding inside this letter, you'll never look at this case the same way again. It's the morning after Christmas, December 26, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey house is still wrapped in decorations, a perfect picture of wealth and status. Inside, something is horribly wrong. Patsy Ramsey wakes up early, walks down the stairs and stops cold. On the steps, a ransom note. Not a quick demand for money. Not a scrap of paper in frantic handwriting. This is 2.5 pages long. She screams, calls for John, calls 911. Before police even step through the front door, this case is already spiraling into chaos. Boulder PD arrives within minutes, but from the start, nothing about the scene makes sense. The house is massive, but no one checks all the rooms. There's no forced entry, no broken windows. Police treat it as a kidnapping, not a potential crime scene. Detectives don't seal off the house. Friends, family, even the family's pastor walk in and out, contaminating evidence. And the most critical mistake? No one finds JonBenet. She isn't discovered for another 7 hours, when her own father finds her in the basement. Let's stop right there. If this was really a kidnapping, how does that make sense? The ransom note demands money, but the body is still inside the house. No one took her. No one attempted to collect the ransom. This is where the case should have been simple. A ransom note means a kidnapping, right? But there was no kidnapping, and that's the first major problem. By the afternoon, detectives aren't buying it. A real kidnapper wouldn't leave a body behind. A real ransom note wouldn't be written on paper from inside the house. A real crime scene wouldn't look this staged. So if the ransom note wasn't written to demand money, then why was it written at all? A ransom note is supposed to be simple, fast, urgent, direct. We have your daughter, pay us or else. But that's not what this is. This is a 2.5-page letter, a 370-word manifesto, carefully worded, filled with odd phrases, contradictions, and so many red flags, it might as well be a crime scene itself. The second red flag? Police quickly realized the ransom note wasn't brought in by an intruder. It was written inside the Ramsey home, on Patsy Ramsey's notepad, with a pen from inside the house. And not just one version. Investigators find practice drafts, as if someone sat down, tested out different wording, then committed to a final version. Now think about that for a second. A kidnapper breaks into the house, takes the time to sit down and compose a long, detailed letter, leaves the victim's body behind, but still delivers the ransom demand. That's not a kidnapping, that's a performance. Most ransom notes are short, a few sentences, maybe a paragraph. This one, 370 words. It reads less like a ransom demand and more like a carefully crafted narrative. And then there's the tone. Experts say it doesn't fit. It waffles between polite and threatening, formal and dramatic. We advise you to be rested. Use that good Southern common sense. We are a small foreign faction. This note feels rehearsed, staged, like someone trying to sound like a kidnapper rather than an actual kidnapper. The third red flag? This ransom note isn't just strange, it's familiar. Several lines mimic dialogue from movies. Dirty Harry, Ransom, Speed, films where kidnappers demand money, issue threats, and play mind games. So, is this note just badly plagiarized ransom fiction? Or is it a script? The fourth red flag. The note demands $118,000. That's a weirdly specific number, until you realize something. John Ramsey's Christmas bonus that year? Exactly $118,000. How would an intruder know that? A ransom kidnapper doesn't demand the exact amount of the victim's bonus. That's personal knowledge. The fifth red flag? At the end of the note, the author writes Victory, SBTC. What does that even mean? Who signs a ransom note like this? What kind of kidnapper demands money, signs off like a supervillain, and then just leaves without collecting? And let's not forget the body was found inside the house. So what was the point of this note? Then, the final nail in the coffin. If this ransom note was real, then the entire crime makes no sense. If they wanted money, why kill JonBenet? If they never planned to take her, why write the note? And if the note was just a distraction, who was the distraction for? This wasn't a message to the police. This was a message to someone else. But who and why? A ransom note is supposed to be simple, a demand, a threat, a transaction. But this note, it's too long, too weird, too staged. And that's where a new theory emerges. What if this wasn't a ransom note at all? What if it was a cipher? Not a demand for money, but a coded message delivered in plain sight. Experts say the wording is unnatural, not like someone speaking under stress, but like something being dictated. The phrasing feels forced. The way words repeat feels deliberate. Some sentences are overly dramatic, like dialogue from a bad crime thriller. The note starts formal. Listen carefully. We are a small foreign faction. Then suddenly it turns polite. Use that good Southern common sense. Then it turns outright theatrical. Don't try to grow a brain, John. It doesn't read like something written organically. It reads like a performance. Linguistic analysts have noticed certain words are repeated in strange ways. You appears 8 times. Ensure appears multiple times. Uncommon for casual writing. Some sentences are weirdly redundant. Then there's the capitalization. Some capital letters don't match normal sentence structure. Some seem out of place, almost emphasized. Is it just bad writing? Or are these markers? Some cryptographers believe this isn't just a note, it's an acrostic cipher. If you pull specific letters, rearrange keywords, or apply a simple cipher technique, a second message could be hiding beneath the surface. Some words have extra letters, almost like they were padded for a reason. Other words seem oddly structured, as if certain letters needed to be in certain places. If this was just a demand for money, why add complexity? Unless the real message wasn't meant for John Ramsey. It wasn't meant for the police. It was meant for someone else, someone who already knew how to read it. Some researchers believe the ransom note wasn't a ransom note at all. It was a prearranged message, not to demand money, but to send a signal. Think about it. If this was a simple crime, why write a full narrative? Why reference movie dialogue? Why use code-like phrasing that doesn't match a typical ransom note? Unless the real purpose wasn't to demand money. Unless it was to deliver instructions. But to who? If this ransom note was a cipher, it raises terrifying questions. Was it a signal to an accomplice? Was it a message confirming the crime had been carried out? Or was it a warning to someone powerful to keep quiet? One thing is clear, this wasn't just a simple ransom note. And if it was a code, then whoever it was meant for, they got the message loud and clear. A ransom note is supposed to be a demand, a clear, direct threat. This note, it's something else. It's long, erratic, overly dramatic, and yet certain words and phrases feel precise, deliberate, and that's when researchers notice something unsettling. Some of these phrases, they aren't random. They resemble intelligence communications. Not a ransom demand, but a coded message. The note ends with victory, a phrase commonly used in covert military operations and psychological warfare messaging. Intelligence analysts have pointed out phrases and structuring techniques that resemble encoded communication. Some words feel like signals, markers that might mean something to the right reader. And here's where it gets chilling. Several phrases in the note have direct connections to intelligence, covert operations, and military training. Let's break this down. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. This is not standard ransom note language. This phrasing is structured exactly like Cold War era disinformation tactics. Soviet psychological operations used nearly identical wording to create paranoia about foreign infiltration. Real-life parallel? Declassified KGB communications used phrases like "we appreciate your efforts, but not the cause you support." You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. This reads like a direct warning to authorities. Intelligence analysts noted this resembles spy tradecraft language used in covert instructions. Real-life parallel? In the FBI's declassified Cold War case files, double agents were taught to use phrasing that specifically warns of counterintelligence tactics as a coded way of signaling their own training. Speaking to anyone about your situation will result in your daughter being beheaded. Cartel and terrorist organizations have used this phrase, but never domestic ransom cases. The only recorded case of beheading threats in ransom demands are tied to terrorist and deep criminal networks, not small-time kidnappers. Real-life parallel? CIA monitored cartel ransom letters from the early 1990s used this exact structure. Any deviation from my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. This isn't just a threat, it's an exact replication of military-grade Psyops structuring. The US military's own psychological warfare training manuals include wording almost identical to this, designed to establish absolute compliance through structured fear. A real-life parallel? Operation Phoenix in the Vietnam War captured Viet Cong operatives reported that similar structured threats were used to break resistance in prisoners. You will withdraw $118,000. I advise you to be rested. This phrasing is oddly formal and structured like operational orders. CIA internal memos from the 1970s used the same structure when giving coded withdrawal instructions in covert financial operations. Real-life parallel? Declassified espionage letters from Soviet double agents also used unnecessary passive phrasing. We advise you to be rested, as a means of embedding meaning without drawing direct suspicion. Listen carefully, the opening phrase. Standard CIA and KGB covert operations manuals specifically instruct operatives to begin sensitive communications with attention-getting imperatives like listen carefully or read closely to immediately establish seriousness and urgency. Real-life parallel? The CIA's Simple Sabotage Field Manual, declassified from World War II, frequently opens covert instructions with phrases like, listen carefully, designed specifically to grab immediate attention from field operatives. We are a small foreign faction. Classic Cold War era covert ops often deliberately misrepresent their size and origin. Small, foreign, independent faction, to avoid attribution, planting confusion about their true identity. Real life parallel? CIA's Operation Ajax in Iran 1953 involved sending communications labeled as originating from independent foreign factions, deliberately vague to prevent direct attribution to intelligence agencies. Don't try to grow a brain, John. Direct personal threats referencing specific individuals by name using informal or insulting phrasing are outlined explicitly in psychological warfare tactics. Such language deliberately destabilizes the target. Real life parallel? FBI counterintelligence training materials in the 1960s, COINTELPRO, instructed agents to personalize and insult targets. For example, don't get clever, don't grow a brain. To provoke emotional responses and compliance. Follow our instructions to the letter. The U.S. Army Field Manual on Psychological Operations explicitly uses the phrase, follow instructions to the letter, to induce absolute compliance, signaling that deviation is not tolerated and indicating military discipline behind the phrasing. Real-life parallel? Declassified psychological warfare instructions during Operation Desert Storm in 1991 warned Iraqi military units with almost identical phrasing, quote, follow these instructions precisely. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter. Intelligence training emphasizes precise statistical threats using percentages or odds to create mental paralysis and fear-based compliance in hostage or negotiation scenarios. Real-life parallel? Declassified FBI hostage negotiation protocols from the 1980s and 90s advised negotiators that presenting exaggerated yet specific statistical probabilities, for example 99% chance, can effectively paralyze rational decision-making in adversaries. Victory, SBTC. Acronyms or initials concluding a message are common covert sign-offs, signaling authenticity to insiders while appearing meaningless externally. Real-life parallel? CIA internal communications, like declassified MKUltra memos, ended with cryptic acronym signatures, now known to represent operational codes or specific handler instructions, indecipherable without context or training. Make sure that you bring an adequate sized attaché. Use of overly formal and bureaucratic language, for example, adequate sized attaché, parallels Cold War intelligence instructions, frequently incorporating unusual formality to subtly indicate covert instructions hidden within innocuous terms. Real-life parallel? Declassified GRU, Soviet military intelligence messages from the Venona project used formal diplomatic terms, i.e., attaché, portfolio, as code references to secret courier instructions. You are not the only fat cat around. Targeting class resentment or economic position, i.e., fat cat, mirrors documented Soviet-era psychological warfare designed to exploit class divisions and social resentment within targeted populations. Real-life parallel? KGB's active measures program used exactly this phrasing in propaganda literature aimed at undermining confidence in Western corporate and political elites, as seen in the Mitrokhin archive. Law enforcement countermeasures. Direct references to law enforcement countermeasures indicate operational familiarity with specific counterintelligence and investigative techniques. Such references strongly suggest intelligence training or direct operational experience. Real-life parallel? The FBI's declassified Cold War-era counter-espionage manuals specifically warn agents about adversaries who openly reference familiarity with countermeasures, highlighting that such references indicate sophisticated training or agency affiliation. Why does this ransom note read exactly like intelligence communication? The note shifts between casual, polite, and aggressive. It sounds off balance, almost staged. It reads like it was designed to distract. This technique? It's actually common in psychological operations. It's called confusion messaging. In espionage, intentionally inconsistent phrasing can be used to obscure a real message. Sometimes, messages are written strangely on purpose to bury a code within them. If this note was meant to signal someone else, its bizarre structure would be an advantage, not a mistake. If this was a real ransom note, why was it so theatrical? Why was it written in the house itself, on family paper with a family pen? Why did it demand the exact amount of John Ramsey's bonus, down to the dollar? Why did it use military-style phrasing in a domestic crime? One theory suggests this wasn't a note for ransom at all. It was a signal to someone who already knew how to read it. Some believe the note was never meant for John Ramsey, but for a third party. A way to confirm something had happened. A way to signal instructions, which raises a terrifying possibility. If this was an attempt to send a coded message, did something go wrong? Was JonBenet's death an accident in the middle of something bigger? Or was it a warning? Think about it. If this was a simple kidnapping, why was the ransom never collected? If this was a staged crime, why does the note read like a military cipher? Either way, this wasn't a ransom. And if the note was an intelligence-style communication, who was meant to receive it? If this was an intelligence-style message, that means the author wasn't just some criminal. They were trained. So let's ask the next question. Who actually wrote this note? The words on the page tell one story. The handwriting, that's an entirely different mystery. From the moment experts analyzed the ransom note, something was off. The handwriting looked shaky, unnatural. Some letters appeared deliberately inconsistent. The pressure varied dramatically, as if the writer was forcing an unnatural grip. And that's when the real questions started. When investigators examined the note, their first suspect was Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother. And at first, it looked like a match. Many of the letters were formed in the same style. The capitalization and spacing had similarities. Even the way certain loops and flourishes were made seemed to align. But then, the contradictions appeared. Some strokes were completely different from Patsy's normal writing. The pressure was all over the place, inconsistent with a natural handwriting sample. Some letters seemed deliberately altered, as if someone was trying to mimic her style, but not perfectly. And that's when experts split. Some forensic analysts swore the likelihood was high that Patsy wrote it. Others completely ruled her out. How is that possible? Because the writing itself, it doesn't behave like a natural handwriting sample. The way certain letters are formed, they don't match normal muscle memory patterns. The shaky quality, it looks like someone was forcing themselves to write unnaturally. Some letters are inconsistent, as if two different people wrote different parts of the note. Handwriting analysts pointed to these anomalies. The letter A is written in two completely different styles, suggesting more than one writer. The way T is crossed changes throughout the note. Some are sharp, others curved. The pressure changes drastically, as if a different hand took over at times. Was this written by multiple people? Some experts believe so. Others raise the more disturbing possibility. What if the person who wrote this wasn't the true author? What if they were writing from dictation? What if the instructions were being given in real time? What if the inconsistency comes from hesitation because they were trying to write in someone else's voice? This isn't speculation. It's a real forensic technique used in criminal investigations. When someone is forced to write a dictated statement, their handwriting often becomes erratic, unnatural, and pressured. Forensic specialists have noted that ransom notes written under duress often contain contradictory letter formations, as if the writer was struggling to keep it consistent. Handwriting disguise techniques used in espionage often involve subtle changes in letter structure to prevent identification. Was this ransom note the result of forced dictation? Or was someone deliberately trying to stage it, mimicking a suspect's writing just enough to create confusion? Some researchers noticed an eerie similarity between the letter formations in the ransom note and historical espionage handwriting samples. In classified intelligence training manuals, agents were taught how to alter their natural handwriting just enough to avoid forensic tracing by changing the slant, pressure, and letter loops. The U.S. Military Psychological Operations Handbook even includes methods for producing disinformation documents with fabricated handwriting patterns, designed to look similar but not identical to a target. Is this what we're looking at? A note that wasn't written naturally? A note that was either forced or strategically altered? A note that intentionally throws off forensic analysts? Here's the thing about handwriting analysis. It's not DNA. It's not fingerprints. It's an interpretive science. And that's exactly why the results have never been definitive. Some experts insist it was Patsy. Some say it's not her at all. Some suggest multiple hands were involved. And here's the real question. If the handwriting points in multiple directions, then was that the point all along? So we know the note is suspicious. We know the writing doesn't quite add up. We know the entire case is tangled in inconsistencies. So what was this crime actually about? Was JonBenet's death really just a tragic murder? Or was it something more? It's one thing to lay out theories. It's another to ask how much of this actually holds up. The JonBenet Ramsey ransom note is real. That much isn't up for debate. It's one of the strangest, most scrutinized pieces of evidence in true crime history. But after decades of analysis, experts are still arguing over what it actually is. The note is one of the longest ransom notes ever recorded, 370 words. It was written inside the house using materials from the house. It contains bizarre phrasing, unnecessary details, and an unnatural tone. The ransom demand was oddly specific, $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. The handwriting was analyzed by experts and they couldn't agree on a match. To this day, no other ransom note in history looks anything like this. Let's be clear, something about this note doesn't make sense. But here's where things get messy. Handwriting analysis is not DNA evidence. It's subjective. Experts have contradicted each other. Some say Patsy Ramsey's handwriting was similar. Others say it wasn't a match at all. The writing itself appears staged, with inconsistent letter formations and pressure variations. Some experts believe more than one person wrote it. That means the handwriting alone can't prove anything. Some researchers believe the note contains hidden messages, unusual structuring, repeated phrases, and deliberate markers. Certain words and capital letters suggest possible encoding. However, no confirmed decryption has ever cracked a hidden message. Could there be a code? Maybe. Has it been solved? No. The wording is unusual for a ransom note. Some phrases resemble military-style psychological operations. The tone shifts dramatically, from polite to threatening to oddly formal. Certain terms like victory and law enforcement countermeasures are not typical of kidnappers. Did the author have intelligence training? We can't prove it, but the phrasing is suspicious. The point of a ransom is to get money in exchange for a hostage. The body was never taken anywhere. JonBenet was found inside the house. The money was never collected. The threats in the note never happened. So if this was never about ransom, then what the hell was the note actually for? What if the real message of the note was never meant for us? The murder of JonBenet Ramsey is one of the most infamous crimes in modern history. But what if we've been asking the wrong question all along? From the beginning, the world has asked, who killed JonBenet? But maybe the real question isn't about who, maybe it's about why. Maybe this wasn't about JonBenet at all, because once you start looking beyond the crime itself, beyond the theatrics of the ransom note, and beyond the bizarre inconsistencies in the case, you start seeing something else entirely. Something bigger. Something hidden in plain sight. JonBenet's father, John Ramsey, wasn't just a businessman. He was the CEO of Access Graphics, a high-tech computing firm specializing in advanced software and in imaging systems. Access Graphics wasn't just any company. It was a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is one of the biggest defense contractors in the world, deeply connected to classified military projects, surveillance systems, and cutting-edge technology. This wasn't a mom-and-pop operation. This was a company with direct ties to the US government, intelligence agencies, and secret defense projects. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. Was John Ramsey involved in something bigger than the public ever knew? Because if so, that changes everything. A normal ransom note demands money and tells you where to drop it. This note, it wasn't a negotiation, it was a statement. The amount demanded, $118,000, was oddly specific. Yes, it was the exact amount of John Ramsey's annual bonus. But why? If you're an ordinary kidnapper demanding a random ransom, why not round it to $120,000 or $200,000? Why use such a precise, traceable number? Some researchers believe the number itself was a signal, a message coded into the amount. Not for John Ramsey, but for someone else. If this wasn't a real ransom, then what was it really saying? If John Ramsey's business was just another tech company, there would be no reason to suspect anything more. But this wasn't just a tech company. Access Graphics worked in advanced computer imaging, secure data processing, and software that could have had military applications. Lockheed Martin is one of the biggest names in aerospace, weapons development, and classified projects. So now, let's look at this from a different angle. If John Ramsey was connected to something classified, could this have been a message, a warning, a way to silence someone? Because here's the thing, if this was an inside operation, an intelligence-style play, then nothing about this crime was random. And maybe JonBenet was never the target. Maybe she was the collateral, an operation gone wrong. Think about it. If this was just a simple break-in, why stage a theatrical ransom note? If this was a botched kidnapping, why was the ransom never collected? If this was an outsider, why was there no forced entry, no signs of struggle, no missing valuables? Unless this was something else entirely. An intelligence operation, a hidden threat, a message disguised as a crime. And somewhere, someone knew exactly what it meant. Instead of asking who killed JonBenet, maybe we should be asking what was really happening in that house that night. Because if the real crime wasn't the murder, but something deeper, then maybe the truth isn't just hidden. Maybe it was never meant to be found. The following segment is a speculative analysis based on publicly available information, open source research, and personal opinion. It is not presented as fact, evidence, or expert testimony. I am not a law enforcement officer, an investigator, or legal professional. This content is intended for thought exploration and open discussion only. Viewers are encouraged to think critically and form their own conclusions. Let's drop the polite language. JonBenet Ramsey's murder was not some botched kidnapping or a tragic domestic accident. This wasn't a story about greed, jealousy, or family dysfunction. This was an op, a psychological operation, targeted, precise, and brutally effective. And it wasn't about JonBenet. We've been chasing shadows in the wrong direction for nearly 30 years. Pageants, parents, intruders, BDI, RDI, IDI, etc. But once you understand the rules of covert operations, Psyops, and counterintelligence doctrine, everything about this case suddenly snaps into place. Because JonBenet Ramsey was not the victim of a random murder. She was the calculated centerpiece of an intelligence-grade psychological operation. And what happened inside that Boulder mansion on Christmas night was a message, executed with surgical precision and dressed up to look like chaos. Let's break it down by motive, operators, method, and psychological strategy, one section at a time. This is where the truth gets uncomfortable. This section has been redacted to keep this video online and avoid the entire video from being taken down. But the full, uncut deep dive, including the redacted scenes, is available right now on Patreon and the Divergent Files podcast for free. Please visit at patreon.com/divergentfiles or anywhere you listen to podcasts at Divergent Files Operation Podcasts. JonBenet Ramsey's murder is unsolved because it was never meant to be solved. It was a message, delivered with surgical cruelty. And that note, it was meant to be a warning, a signature. It wasn't asking for money. It was saying one thing. We are inside the house. We know everything. You want to understand what happened to JonBenet Ramsey? Stop thinking like a detective. Start thinking like an intelligence operative. Because the real case, the one that matters, was closed the moment the note hit the staircase. And every year we keep looking for the wrong killer, we prove the operation worked exactly as designed. This case has haunted the public for decades. It's been called the most infamous unsolved murder in modern American history. A little girl, a wealthy family, a bizarre ransom note, and an investigation that never made sense. And yet, maybe that was the point all along. Because in most cases, we assume the truth is out there, waiting to be found. We assume if we just dig deep enough, connect the dots, or follow the evidence, we'll eventually get to the answer. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if, from the very beginning, this case was designed to be impossible to truly solve? The contradictions, the chaos, the evidence that leads everywhere and nowhere at the same time. We were meant to see everything, but never understand anything. Governments, intelligence agencies, and power structures sometimes don't need to hide the truth. They just need to bury it under layers of conflicting stories. They don't erase the mystery. They make it impossible to decipher. They let the public look at the puzzle, but never allow them to put the pieces together. They flood the story with so much noise that no one can agree on what's real. And if that was a strategy here, it worked. because the more you investigate the case, the more it falls apart. The ransom note reads like a cipher, but no one can crack it. The crime scene was either staged or sabotaged, maybe both. The investigation, a circus of misdirection. And at the end of it all, nothing actually makes sense. That's cognitive overload. It's a psychological warfare tactic. If you give people too much conflicting information, they stop being able to tell what's real and what's not. In this case, it's the perfect example, Exhibit A. So ask yourself, what if we've been asking the wrong questions all along? What if the ransom was never about money? What if this wasn't just a murder, but an operation? What if JonBenét's death was never meant to be solved, because solving it would reveal something we were never meant to know? And here's the part that should truly keep you up at night. What if this wasn't a cover-up of a crime, but the crime itself was the cover? In short, we were meant to be obsessed. We were meant to keep looking. We were meant to chase the illusion of solving it. But we were never meant to see the actual truth. And that leaves just one final question. If this case was designed to be unsolvable, then what were we never supposed to find? That's it. That's the end of the episode. But the mystery, that never truly ends. We were given a crime that doesn't make sense. A ransom note that doesn't act like a ransom note. A case that refuses to be solved. And yet, decades later, here we are. Still searching, still looking for something buried beneath the noise. I'm Ralph, that's Wendell, and this is Divergent Files. If this one got your brain buzzing, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Not because it pleases the algorithm, which, let's be honest, hasn't exactly been kind to channels like this, but because you keep this show alive. And if you really want to go deeper, join us on Patreon. YouTube doesn't cover any of this. Not the research, not the production, not the hours spent chasing mysteries that most people will ignore. It's just us and you. So if you want extended episodes, behind the scenes chaos, and access to the stories too wild for the main channel, head over to patreon.com/Divergent Files. Oh, and we're officially on podcasts. Divergent Files Project Podcast is live wherever you listen. So if you ever need to question reality while driving, working, or avoiding small talk, we've got you covered. At the end of the day, this channel isn't just mine, it's yours. Your theories, your curiosity, your wildest ideas. That's what keeps this going. Got a mystery you want us to crack wide open? Drop it in the comments. I read them all. The world is strange. The stories even stranger. So stay curious, stay kind, and remember you are truly appreciated.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go stare at my walls for the next 5 hours and rethink my entire existence. This case is going to haunt me forever.